Sunday, August 20th, 2023. In a quiet corner of Wrekenton Gateshead, the streets had settled into the familiar hush of a late summer night. For most, it was the end of a peaceful weekend, but at a modest home on this street, that silence was broken by a single, sharp knock. A hand moved toward the door handle just before 11 p.m. What happened next wasn't a random burglary. It was a final, brutal act in a campaign of violence that had been building quietly for days. An unseen crew was out to send a message. They didn't just want to rob their targets, they wanted to intimidate, control, and punish. Their weapon of choice? A common household chemical turned into a silent and devastating agent of terror. This was the fourth and most brutal attack in just 11 days. By the time the police realized they were dealing with a linked series of assaults, it was too late. A young man, Andrew Foster, was fighting for his life. The culprits thought they had covered their tracks. A stolen car burned to a charred frame, no eyewitnesses at the scene, and no usable forensics. They couldn't have been more wrong. They were caught not by a slip-up at the crime scene, but by a chilling lack of self-awareness just minutes after the murder. The most damning evidence would come from a simple trip to a petrol station. The gang would ultimately be sentenced to a combined total of 118 years in prison. But how did police connect 4 separate attacks across an 11-day period to the very same crew? And what did a simple drink order at a petrol station reveal that led detectives directly to their doorstep? This is the harrowing story of a crew who turned on their own, and how their desire for control led to a fatal reckoning. At the center of this story was Andrew Foster, a 26-year-old man living with his partner, Katie Harrison, in Wrekenton. Friends described him as laid back and good-humored, someone who enjoyed a quiet life with those close to him. To his neighbors, he was just another young man in the area. But beneath the surface, Foster was involved in small-scale cannabis dealing. He would buy in bulk, turn it into edibles, and resell them in small batches. It wasn't a high-level operation, but it kept money coming in and placed him squarely within South Tyneside's criminal supply chain. This is where his path crossed with Yusef Wynn, a 39-year-old from Jarrow. Wynn was a supplier with a reputation for control and intimidation. Prosecutors would later describe him as the orchestrator of a campaign of violence designed to keep his network in check. Wynn's business model was simple. He believed any dealer profiting from his supply owed him a cut, known as taxing. This was not up for negotiation. To carry out his orders, Wynn had a crew. His chief enforcer was Kenneth "Kenny" Fawcett, 33, from North Shields, a man with a history of violent offending who was trusted to carry out the most dangerous tasks. John Wandless, 33, was brought in for muscle and played a key role in the final attacks and disposing of evidence. The youngest member, 22-year-old Josh Hawthorne, was a planner and acted as a communications link between Wynn and those on the ground. Together, they worked as a close-knit group, focused on controlling their trade through fear. The tension between Foster and Wynn had been simmering for months. Court proceedings revealed Foster believed he was owed £60,000 from a cannabis grow Wynn had arranged in his loft, but he never saw the money. The timing of an alleged assault by Wynn and a robbery at gunpoint left Foster deeply suspicious. This history made Andrew Foster a marked man. When the knock came on his door, he was part of the very network that was about to end his life. The campaign began 11 days before the fatal attack. On August 9th, Fawcett and Wynn targeted a small-time dealer in South Shields. The motive was overdue payment. When the door opened, Fawcett sprayed ammonia directly into the victim's face, leaving him in agony. 3 days later, on August 12th, Fawcett and Wandless used a stolen grey Volkswagen Golf for a second attack in Hebburn. An innocent friend of the intended target answered the door and was sprayed in the face without a word. The man's eyesight took months to recover. The violence escalated further on August 16th in Jarrow. Fawcett and Wandless entered a home and confronted a dealer with a broken leg. When his partner, Nicola Dixon, tried to defend him, she was sprayed twice with ammonia. The attack left her permanently blind in one eye, which later had to be removed. The stage was set for the final attack. It was just after 11 p.m. when the same grey Volkswagen Golf pulled up near Andrew Foster's home. Inside were Fawcett and Wandless. CCTV would later show two masked figures approach the door. As Foster opened it, Fawcett immediately raised a bottle and sprayed ammonia into his face. The chemical burned his eyes and airways instantly. Foster staggered backward, gasping that it was ammonia, before collapsing. The attackers moved past him, ransacked his kitchen, and stole his edible-making equipment and cannabis before fleeing. Upstairs, Foster's partner, Katie Harrison, found him struggling to breathe and called emergency services. The ammonia had caused catastrophic damage to his respiratory system. Despite emergency treatment, Andrew Foster died the next day. The chemical assault was now a murder investigation. Police faced a difficult challenge, but in the moments after the murder, a crucial mistake was made. Fawcett and Wandless drove the stolen Volkswagen to a nearby petrol station. High-quality CCTV captured the driver's face and a distinctive neck tattoo. Audio recorded him calling to his passenger, addressing him as Kenny, who asked for a strawberry yogurt drink. The driver with the tattoo was identified as John Wandless, and the police now had their primary suspect, Kenny, in their sights. The investigation moved swiftly. Cell site data placed Wandless and Kenneth Fawcett in the Wrekenton area at the time of the murder. Analysis of the stolen Volkswagen's movements showed it had crossed the river only on August 12th, 16th, and 20th, the dates of the last 3 attacks. Detectives were able to retroactively link the other ammonia attacks to the same crew. The victims, initially reluctant to cooperate, provided statements that solidified the case. The suspects, in a desperate attempt to destroy evidence, burned out the Volkswagen Golf on August 22nd, 2 days after the murder. But the deliberate act of arson only provided investigators with another piece of the puzzle. The burnt wreckage was forensically linked to the crime scenes, and Wandless later pleaded guilty to handling stolen goods and arson. Warrants were prepared, and the arrests began. Wandless was taken into custody first, followed by Fawcett during a traffic stop. Hawthorne was found the next day, and text messages between him and Wynne were uncovered, confirming his role as the communications link. Finally, Wynne himself was arrested at dawn. Police found high-value watches and cash, consistent with his role as the leader of a lucrative criminal enterprise. By the end of the week, all 4 men were in custody, and a murder case with a full cast of suspects was ready for trial. On July 26, 2024, the case against Yusuf Wynne, Kenneth Fawcett, John Wandless, and Josh Hawthorne came to a verdict at Newcastle Crown Court. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case, using the combined digital and forensic evidence. The defense for each man centered on denying involvement, but their arguments were ultimately dismissed by the court. The judge, Mr. Justice Dove, described the attacks as cruel and terrifying, and the use of ammonia as a weapon capable of causing irreversible harm. He condemned the crew's actions as a curse on our communities. News of Andrew Foster's death spread quickly, and tributes poured in. His partner, Katie Harrison, spoke of finding him collapsed, and his mother described him as her best friend. In court, she said his loss had left a gap that could never be filled, a pain made worse by the horrible, violent way he died. The sentences were presented in order of culpability. Yusuf Wynne, the orchestrator, received a life sentence with a minimum of 33 years. Kenneth Fawcett, the principal enforcer, received a life sentence with a minimum of 32 years. John Wandless, who assisted in the attacks and the disposal of the car, was sentenced to a minimum of 31 years. And Josh Hawthorne, the youngest member and planner, received a minimum of 22 years. The case of Andrew Foster serves as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers within the illegal drug trade. It is a powerful example of how a dispute over profit and control can escalate into a campaign of terror with life-altering and ultimately fatal consequences. While the men responsible will spend a combined total of over a century behind bars, the lives of their victims and their families have been forever changed. This story is a sobering lesson that in the world of crime, a final reckoning can be more brutal than anyone could imagine. If you're new to our channel and want to hear more true UK crime stories told exactly as they happened, make sure to like and subscribe. There's always another case to uncover.